Hi, everyone. This is Francesca, Curriculum Director with Code Coven. I am here today with Midi and Ami to talk a little bit about getting started with game development. And so they both took our Intro to Game Making course in the summer of 2020. We'll just be talking casually about what it's like to start making games, to start getting into coding, and a little bit just about their backgrounds as well. So kicking it on over. Hi, everyone. How's it going? How are you?
It still feels too early here, even though it's noon. But we're going for it.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like I'm also having a slow start this morning as well. Yeah. How are you, Amy?
Pretty good. Just starting that 2021 vibes, trying to feel the air of the year.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's big relatable. But thanks so much for joining me today. As I said already, it's great to see you both and to get to catch up a little bit. So thanks for joining me. So yeah, just to kick us off, if each of you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick intro of kind of who you are, what you're up to, and anything that's going on for you.
Yeah, so I'll go first. I'm Midi. I am an illustrator and comic artist. I mostly do like a lot of online indie store kind of branding thing.
I'm Amy. I am an illustrator as well. Kind of focusing more on visual narration. It's like storytelling in multiple mediums. But recently really getting into game dev and the excitement of it, like coding.
Also, I'm super glad to hear that. And I guess, did either of you have any experience with game development or coding coming into that intro class?
Nothing. So the only thing I really knew about coding at all was Tumblr themes and DeviantArt, HTML. Aside from that, I used like RenP for like a hot minute, but couldn't really push myself to get into the whole actual coding development part. I'll draw art and I'll draw concepts, but then it's like the structure, put it in there, and it's like, I'm afraid. Like
Yeah, and I think that's such a common experience for folks, like having their first exposure to code be like Tumblr like templates or like MySpace like layouts, or a lot of folks doing things on Neopets to like customize their pages, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely that was also my first exposure to code as well. Amy, did you have any background doing code or game dev?
Definitely, I mean, similar realms of like MIDI where it's just like mostly just online like customization coding, but like I did dip into game design like conceptually and like narratively, and like it was through my school program and like through a STEAM plant grant. So, working with a team of coders and 3D modelers, and then with like a mentor for game design, I kind of like dipped my toes into like what game design could be, but definitely wasn't like heavily involved in the process. Like I was kind of like there conceptually, but then like wasn't there for the process of it being made and like the iterations and like the testing. So like to me, it still felt so foreign because I wasn't touching it. Like I didn't have my hands on it.
Yeah, and I think that remains pretty common for a lot of, illustrators or animators who are working in game development. Usually when you're working with a team, you do that handoff and then it kind of like magically goes into the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can see very, very like, I don't know. Yeah, mystical, magical, but but yeah, I'm curious also because you both came into game development and into this course with like a visual arts kind of background. And I'm curious, does that influence the type of games that you made in the class or the types of games that you would like to make in the future?
Definitely. Because with games, I kind of think about how it looks or how it'll like visually feel when you're playing it. So my mind goes to the art part of it because that's also just what I know the most. Through the game making course, that also kind of tripped me up a little bit because I would have like big visual ideas and then I try to code it and I'm just like,
Yeah.
Yeah. big agree on that. I think that like what we're comfortable with, like the things that we make, and this is where like, you know, being in Code Coven and like doing a game with Midi and like learning the ins and outs of like doing collaborative games, where it's like I think that I do prefer games that I can help and illustrate as much as I can. But obviously it's like with certain narratives and certain mechanics, I've grown more comfortable with the idea of like breaking out of my personal aesthetics and going more into like what is the ideal like visual to match the direction of the game. But I still think like I'm still new to this stuff, but like I'm more comfortable with it now than I was in the beginning.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to jump on that point about making games being, you know, it's extremely collaborative. We're often working with teams and folks from different skill sets and disciplines. And during the course, we mostly focused on small individual projects, but the two of you did get to make a game together, and it was called Don't Kill Anything. And I wanted to just have both of you kind of reflect on how was it different working together on a project versus individually? Were there like certain things that you struggled with? Did you find it more challenging? Did you enjoy it?
So definitely can say I enjoyed it wholeheartedly. The differences, I think it's kind of like with myself, I don't have to like talk that much through it. It's kind of like doing it and seeing it work, and if it doesn't work, but working with someone, I have to make sure they understand and make sure we're on the same point, because otherwise it just doesn't, without the proper communication, it just doesn't happen essentially.
I think definitely it's like what was really nice about doing a project with Midi was like learning the steps of like not necessarily like constantly updating someone like I've done this, and every little tidbit of like reporting like I've done this little thing and I did this and this and that, and it's just like that's not the way to go, and more like being efficiently cohesive when you do your part, like especially when we started learning how to do like those Git updates, like when we were using Git and like actually updating the file and making those like having those descriptions or messaging each other like this is what I did, this is what happened, and like
the repositories.
Yes, the repositories. Thank you.
I had to dig for the terminology too. That's why I was like,
yeah, it's been a while.
it's been a hot second, but yeah, just using repositories in a way that's like actually kind of keeping it organized for one another, and you know, being efficient with that, and like not bugging them, not being like what are you doing, like not like forcing them to give you updates as well.
Yeah, I never felt like I was like bugging Amy or Amy was bugging me. It just kind of like happened, and it was okay, and it was great.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big thing, and I would say that a lot of that comes down to like trust, right, as well, with the people you're working with, that you trust them to be able to like work on things and be proactive, and also like to ask if they need, you know, information or support from you as well. Yeah, totally. And I think yeah, I love working collaboratively on games. I really don't like working on games by myself, because I find that just I get more inspired and I have more motivation if I'm kind of like sharing a vision with the people that I'm working with.
I think the one thing that was really great when learning about working with Midi was that there was a lot of things that even though we could make solo projects, which was I think really necessary before doing group ones, because then we can figure out like our own flow and how we work and like the order of like how we try to approach game making. So like when we arrived to the group ones, I think what was really nice is that the one thing that I knew I always put off very last was sound design and like picking music, because like especially when I did my own solo game, that was the last thing. I did that last minute. I was like just throwing something in that suits, right? And then Midi came in like doing this group project, like I got this, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah,
phenomenal.
It was literally like one of the first few things I was thinking of, because I was just like music and like visuals really like set games for me. So I was like, what will sound good with this? I want little buttons when you click them, like you hear the little sound. Like I love that immersion sort of thing. So I was all aboard that. I was like, Amy, I got these sounds, and she was like, you got sound? You thought about that? I'm like, yeah.
So now that you've worked on a bunch of small projects, mostly individual, but we have done, a collaboration project as well. I'm curious if, now that you've been kind of in this world of game design and development, has your opinion of, I guess, like games or the games industry changed? Or like when you play games, do you think about them differently? Do you experience them differently now that you know how they're built?
I'm definitely more empathetic when it comes to like bugs or like tiny things that were like missed. Because before I'd just be like, oh, this feels so obvious to me. How did they miss that? And then when I'm coding, I'm just like, I'm tired. I'll save it for later. So
yep. It's really funny because I don't think my general opinion of games has changed that much, but especially when you said like playing games and if we notice they're like different, it's really funny because the moment, I think the second round or the second time I played Among Us, I immediately looked at my friends, or not look, but I was like commenting to my friends, this is a Unity game. Like I was like, you just move this and that. It's one, like not like walking, running. It's just one animation. You go up and like, I was like, this could be made in Unity. And then I Googled it and it was made in Unity. And I was like, guess it's like, must be like a bajillion times more complicated to like implement multiplayer like that.
Definitely. Just even considering like how servers are set up for internet things, you can miss me with that. Like, I couldn't imagine.
That's so funny because I also totally like if I'm playing a game, I tend to like dissect it and I'm thinking about like how did they do this animation and like, oh, that shader looks cool. I wonder how they did that. And like, so I do the exact same thing.
When it comes to games, I think like growing up, I just really didn't think much about them. So that's why I think that like my opinions of games isn't that much different, but more of like I see the potential of them way more. I just saw it as like a product way. I saw it as like, I'm a customer and I'm here for this product. And then that was it. I never thought the layers implemented as a creation of art, of like project and collaboration and like a piece of work essentially. So I think that's really cool after taking this class, is like being able to sense it from that perspective of like changing the perspective to on the other side. I can talk to a friend and we can like bond over a game, and it'd be something that like was just so casual. Like we all bonded over Pokemon. That was like so standardized that I didn't think about it like as a game, like the way it started and the way that it was created. And like the fact that Pokemon was easily bonded over because it was a video game that you could touch and customize as your own team and like play with another and like trade with other people and like create this kind of like narrative that was all personalized to yourself. Not that much different because it's like the same plot line, but like you could get different Pokemon, talk to different people and like kind of explore it in your own world.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that's why games are so powerful. Yeah. And as you said, like why people can bond over them, because we're having, we're playing within the same space with the same rules in the same world, but each person's experience is going to be a little bit personalized by how they interact with it.
And this is why representation and diversity is so important in games, because games have the potential to get so personal and build communities if you open that door to more people and let them immerse in like an even more personal way. The reach is just out there. It can just be so much farther, which is why like when newer games like Animal Crossing and like the newer versions of Pokemon like let you customize yourself to be black, brown, change your hairstyle. And now even more with Animal Crossing, you can have different textured hairs. It just brings so much more to the. It just brings so much more.
It really does. I think what's really beautiful about that is like keeping game makers accountable in a way that is both as an audience, but also in the game dev field, which is really interesting, which is why I think Code Coven is such a beautiful way of like keeping the game dev field itself accountable. Because it's like, there's one way to be like criticizing the majority of male white men and being like criticizing, you're not like diversifying the games enough, which is they aren't. But also it's like, what's really cool is that you're also just going out of, I'm putting the next step, which is opening these doors, making it accessible for diverse audience, like diverse creators to go from audience to creator and like become part of the development and like create their games and their stories. So it's like, I think slowly we are able to like really push that accountability and really push that narrative in like where it belongs, you know?
Yeah, it's absolutely a thing, right? Of like breaking this cycle of like a certain type of people making games basically for themselves, right? Or sharing their experiences, which attracts those same people who then go into game dev. And it's this continuous cycle. Yeah, and I really do believe that by providing, you know, education and opportunity, and uplifting the voices of people who have fantastic, incredible, amazing stories to tell and enabling those folks to come into the games industry. That's how we break that cycle. And that's how we get new games and interesting content and fantastic stories. So yeah, very well said. And as kind of like a wrap up question, now that you've been making games for a little bit, I'm curious what advice you would give to folks who are interested in getting started with game making, what things they should be thinking about or exploring, or anything else you'd like to mention.
Aside from the general, like, just jump into it. I think also it's important to start simple. I think the most important thing I learned from the intro to game making class is figuring out your scope, making something that you know you sort of can finish, even though if it's not perfect, and knowing that, you know, the next one will always be better. The more you do it, the better you get. But start small so you don't feel like it's like overwhelming.
I think also like exploring different types of learning, because I think that, you know, we took a intro to game making class, which is more workshop and lecture based. But I think that like, especially me growing up, what would always help me learn faster when it comes to digital media, and what ended up helping me through like studio time in our class would be like following a tutorial that's online and like mimicking it. And like something that Francesca pointed out whenever I showed her my work in progress was like, do you know why you took that step? And like, why was this step taken? And like, what does it mean? The more we want to learn and the more we want to explore and Google search our own problems and Google search our own answers, that's how we learn the most. I forget if it was like the class description or if it was like the first like class introduction syllabus day, you know, whatever you want to call it. Like you encourage us like, use Google, like use Google, use it. It's your best friend. Like people in the field still use it. Like just use it. And it's like, oh, cool. Like removing that limitation, I think gives a lot of people like, oh, like a relax, like a weight off their shoulder, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I started learning, like taking my first like computer science classes, there was this big focus on like memorizing things and like knowing all this stuff. But I think like when you go into actual game dev, we're all Googling things all the time.
Yeah,
as long
and
as
keeping notes.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely think when I teach these intro classes, for me, it's less about teaching you exactly like this specific skill set and how to do X number of things. But I try to really focus more on enabling you to like go out and continue learning and finding that information for yourselves, right? So that you're once you leave the class, you're not like blocked. You're not like, oh, well, I know how to do these 7 things and that's what I can do. Yeah, I think just like there's so much great information out there that's really accessible now. And there are so many fantastic online communities that are supporting learning in the game dev and tech spaces. yeah, and just being able, like knowing how to tap into those to continue your own learning and growth, I think is really important. Awesome. All right. So we are just about at time. Thank you again so much for joining me. Before we do wrap up, if you would like to plug any links, let us know where to find you, or let us know anything else that you're up to currently.
Yes, I do have Instagram and Twitter. That's where I mostly post my arts. I also stream on Twitch, so that's a new thing for me. I don't really stream on Twitch like this. I mostly use my mascots and personas, so that's been fun.
So I also use social media at times. I'm definitely not as frequent. So my handle is usually AMIYCAI, my name. And then so is my website, where it's just my name.com. It's soon going to be kind of tied more into game dev, which is going to be more tied into my future also Twitch streams, because I want to do game dev streams. Yeah, I just really love doing it. I just really, I miss coding so much.
I'm so excited.
I want to give myself like 2 to 4 hours a week at least, like no guilty, like just coding. Like I need that.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you were mentioning earlier how people bond over Pokemon. Midi and I have both been streaming Pokemon, so we've been bonding over that.
It's been quite the adventure too, because I've never done a Nuzlocke. But my partner really likes Nuzlocke, so I was like, let's do this together, and it's been full of joy and pain.
It's been a lot of fun. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining me today for this conversation, but also just thanks in general for being part of the Code Coven community. I'm also really grateful that I got to teach that class because I got to meet you. So and thanks so much for keeping in touch and just being a part of this community. So thank you so much. And we will wrap up here. So thanks.
Bye. Thanks for having us.